I'm back from the witness protection program. Chris Graham here on a podcast. We're going to talk in this one about UVA basketball a lot. Yeah, I've been gone for a couple weeks. No reason, just very busy and prioritizing certain things, trying to get my schedule working a little better. And I keep thinking I need to sit down and record a podcast. Need to sit down, especially with UVA basketball going the way things are going. We're going to talk on this podcast a lot about where things are. We'll focus on the Wake Forest loss because that's sort of where we most recently saw things, and then we'll look ahead a little bit to Virginia Tech. I honestly haven't looked at Virginia Tech from a preview standpoint. We'll be doing that in the next few hours. I mean, literally as I'm recording this, just got off the ACC teleconference Zoom with Coach Tony Bennett and got to listen in there. A few topics coming up. Nothing really revealing said this week. Last week he broke the news about Dante Harris, just which was there's still no news about Dante Harris, and there's still no news about Dante Harris. But nothing really earth-shaking today coming out of that Zoom teleconference. So let's go back and go. I'll start with my five observations about the Virginia loss, most recent loss to Wake Forest, 66-47 down in Winston-Salem on Saturday. Virginia had the week off after the loss at NC State and Raleigh the previous Saturday, another big double-digit loss. In fact, all five losses this season for Virginia. If you're watching this, you know this, all by double digits. This one a 19-point loss. Uh, and this one kind of felt very similar to the others in lots of ways. Wake led 12-4, 10 minutes into the game. Virginia started the game 1 of 14 from the field. Did get back to tie the game briefly on an Andrew Rohde jumper with 5:50 to go in the first half. It was just 14-14 at that point. Good defense, horrible offense. An 11-1 Wake run pushed the lead back up to 10. It was 6 at halftime. Wake opened the second half on a 10-2 run in the first 3+ minutes, and the game never got back to within 12 thereafter. This Virginia team just seems to fall in that realm when they're on the road, 0-4 on the road, 0-5. Well, let's see, 1-5 if you count the 2-point win over West Virginia, 1-5 away from JPJ, right? Um, but this team falls behind early in games on the road and just can't figure a way back in, and that's been a theme this year for this team. Let's start with the first observation. Jordan Miner looked fine in his first career start at center, and actually that was one thing that Tony Bennett did address in his Zoom teleconference just a few minutes ago for me as I'm recording this, just to say that he thought Jordan played well, which the numbers would back that up. 9 points, 5 rebounds in 22 minutes. His first extensive action of the season. He had not played more than 12 minutes in a game all season long, and those were in some of those guarantee games early in the season. I in my game preview, I had thought that Tony Bennett would go bigger. Wake Forest plays big. They've got a couple of 6'10" guys, and then a 7'1" guy, Efton Reed, the Gonzaga transfer, that they'll play in the post, and they pretty much play that. They don't go small very often. Small being what we call in basketball, going four guards around a big. When I looked at the lineup analysis for Wake, Steve Forbes goes big. He stays with his two big guys in the post for the bulk, if not all of the action, depending on the opponent. And so Tony Bennett started. I thought he might start Blake Buchanan along with Jake Groves in the front court, and then Ryan Dunn as a big guard. But he actually went with Jordan Miner, and Miner again did well. Defensively, when I looked at the synergy numbers, he did not give up a point. He actually in one-on-one matchups, uh, the guys he was guarding 0 for 2 in his time on the floor. So you can't ask for anything better than that, as far as I'm concerned. Um, the TV announcer said before the or during the game, I guess, that they were told either by Bennett or someone close to the program that Bennett went with Miner because Miner had a good week in practice. Tony then confirmed that post game in his brief talk with reporters after. Um, and so, hey, good practice time earns Miner some time on the floor. He also talked about in his post game and then again today how Miner had sort of earned some more look because of the way he played in the garbage time. Tony didn't use the term garbage time. That's my term. But the end of the loss to NC State, Miner had played, I think, 7 minutes at the end of that game. and actually looked pretty good in that one. 6.3 rebounds in that one. Uh, the other bigs didn't do so much. Jake Groves has really been a struggle. He's been struggling of late. He only had 3 points, made a three-pointer. He had 4 rebounds in 17 minutes. Buchanan did get a game. Buchanan started the game against NC State more than a week ago. And he played 22 minutes in that one, got 4 points and 4 rebounds. He got 8 minutes against Wake Forest. Missed all three of his shots. All three were mid-range jumpers, and he had 1 rebound in his 8 minutes. Leon Bond got some minutes in the post, the 6'5" guy, and I've said this a lot about Leon. His game is a 6'7" or 6'8" guy, but he's 6'5", and I can see him in a different situation, playing for a different team, maybe a team that plays a four-guard lineup, and he being one of the four guards, he could kind of do some damage as a post guy in a four-guard lineup at 6'5", but I'm not sure in the ACC at 6'5" he's going to do a lot. He did play some minutes in the post against Wake. He shot the ball a lot. He didn't shoot it well, 2 of 7, and he had 4 rebounds in his 21 minutes off on the floor. So second observation, Ryan Dunn struggling again on the defensive end. This is not something we expect. Ryan Dunn, we're told, is a lottery pick, and I looked again this weekend just to make sure I hadn't missed anything. And every draft I looked at, not all of them has a lottery pick, but every single mock draft I looked at for 2024 had Ryan Dunn listed as a first round pick, and several had him as a lottery pick, a couple middle, a couple late lottery, and it's all because of his defense. His offensive game is nowhere near NBA level, NBA ready. His defense is what his calling card is, and lately he's not been as good. I noted in my game preview that Dunn had given up 7 points on 2 of 4 shooting in the loss at Notre Dame back on December 30th, and then 9 points on 3 of 5 shooting in the loss at State last weekend. On Saturday, the synergy numbers tell us that Dunn gave up 10 points on 4 of 8 shooting in his one-on-one guard situations on defense. So that's 3 straight games. And in fact, I look back even a little further. The Northeastern game, the 54-52 win that started getting us all thinking, hey, something's wrong with this team, perhaps. They need to start working a little harder, taking it a little more seriously. He gave up 8 points in that game defensively. So, it's something. And the issue then being compounded, he'd had a couple of good offensive games in the Notre Dame and NC State losses. He did not have a good offensive game, or not even much of an offensive game on Saturday at Wake. He shot the ball 4 times. He had a couple of free throws that hit every part of the rim. I've never seen back-to-back free throws hit that many parts of the rim and both go in. It bounced, both hit the back iron, bounced straight up, bounced around, hit the backboard, everything else. But he made them. But 1 of 4 from the floor in 23 minutes, and he had 1 rebound. That's really surprising. He'd had a couple of double-doubles recently, so just 1 rebound in that game. He's an energy guy who plays defense, and he had neither in the loss at Wake. So that's all you can say there about Ryan Dunn. Andrew Rohde comes off the bench, kind of, sort of. Another thing I'd foreseen. I don't get to talk to anybody that knows anything before games strategy wise. We don't get the same access. I'm taking an aside here. We don't get the same access. I'm on all the ACC media release list. Carolina. You talk several times a week with Hubert Davis down at Duke. You get all kinds of access to the coaching staff there, players there, between games, after games, before games, almost during games, right? You get the once a week thing, teleconference, when the ACC teleconference starts with Tony, and that just started last week, and then you get the post games with Tony. So everything I everything I try to write is just me kind of guessing along with the team and with the coaching staff and what they might be strategizing. And I had strategized along with them in my game preview for Wake Forest that, hey, if Tony goes this way and goes big with his starting lineup, that means Rohde's the odd man out. Well, Rohde didn't start, but then he played 31 minutes. So that's pretty much starter minutes. In fact, he'd been averaging 29.1 minutes per game going into that. So he played his minutes. He had 6 points on 3 of 7 shooting. He had a rebound and 2 assists. We're just not getting the Andrew Rohde that we were advertised. And it's not for lack of time on the floor. I've just mentioned he's averaging, it's over 29.1 minutes a game now. He was a 17.1 point per game scorer as a freshman back at St. Thomas. He was his league rookie of the year. We've gotten three double-digit games in 16 games from Andrew Brody this season. And the season high, just a 13-point game in the 13-point effort in the win over Texas A&M, which seems so long ago. And what a great win that was. That stretch between the Thanksgiving break and the exam break. That's the UVA seems to have peaked there. The blowout win over Texas A&M, the blowout win over Syracuse. There was a guarantee game in there. But Rhodey, since that game, since that 13-point effort, averaging 4.9 points a game, and he's shooting 30% from the floor and 22.9% from three, and he's still getting 30 minutes a game. I can't figure this out for the life of me. Got some emails over the weekend after this column that I'm kind of using as my crib notes, um, where I didn't say it, but I was wondering aloud, I guess you could say, why Rhodey gets those minutes. And you got a guy like Elijah Gertrude sitting on the bench who isn't getting any run. I don't care what guys are doing in practice. If we've got 16 game uh, stat sheets and everything else to look at, tapes and everything else to look at and see that a guy's not doing anything, maybe it's time for a change. But that's just me thinking that out loud. Next observation, the fourth of my five observations, IMAC, dear sweet IMAC. Man, I tell you what, he's shooting 48.1% from three. And, at post game, we don't get a lot, we don't get any access to these kids except for post game situations. And they give you two guys. You don't get to talk to, get to talk to two guys as a media group. So whenever they bring IMAC in, you hear him say he wants to prove he's more than just a 3-point shooter. And of course, he's got to do that. He's obviously 48.1%. He's a great 3-point shooter, but you're not going to get to the next level if you're just a 3-point shooter. You got to be able to, because guys will just do what they're doing to IMAC right now, which is focus their defense on him, stay with him, zone off of him, not leave him, not give him a sliver of a good look. If you can prove that you can put the ball on the floor, if a guy closes out on you, you pump fake and get around them and get in the lane and make a shot, whether it's a mid-range shot or get to the rim. You'll get that extra sliver of light on the 3-point line, and it'll just make you that much more valuable. Inside the arc this season, so I mentioned 48.1% from beyond the arc. Okay, I wanted to preface that again. Inside the arc this season, overall, 33.3%, 20 of 60. And then when I broke it down, I went to the synergy numbers 3 of 12 on shots at the rim, 1 of 5 on runners, 12 of 41 on dribble jumper. So when he does put the ball on the floor and tries to get either a mid-range jumper or get to the rim, he's not so if you're a defense, your strategy, if you're a defender out there, let him dribble past me. He's not going to make it, and he's not an assist guy. So that's the phase of IMAX game that needs to develop. No doubt about that. Last observation, it's hard to be Reese Beekman right now. He is the only guy consistently playing now. He's just 3 for 12 from the field. He had a game high 10 points for Virginia, at least, in the weight loss. But none of I was curious. I went to the game, the game rundown. All of his 12 shots were jumpers, either 2-point jumpers or 3-point jumpers. Nothing at the rim. He had 4 assists, tying his season low. It's kind of hard though to do what you need to do to be Reese Beekman. Penetrate the lane and either dish off to a cutter like a Brian Dunn for a dunk, or to an outside guy, a Rhodey or a McKneely, obviously, for open three. If they're not going to make the shots, 4 assists. He had 1 turnover, which was early in the game, and then it's just hard to be him right now. You can't pass it to yourself. A lot of people reading a column I wrote. This was actually the first story I wrote after the game. I'm not really writing game recaps anymore. I figure you've already watched the game. You can read a recap somewhere else. You're not coming to me to get the blow by blow. So I don't really do those anymore for the Virginia games. I titled this one, "It's Time to Push the Panic Button," and not just on this season, but maybe on the future of Virginia basketball. I mean, Wake shot 50%. I didn't talk about Wake at all yet here on this podcast, but so Wake shot 50% as a team. Virginia had 10 guys on the floor. Nine of them were under 50%. The only guy who wasn't was Tane Murray. He made his only shot. So that's how bad things were. Virginia shot 28.1%, 4 of 14 on shots at the rim, 10 points in the paint, out rebounded by 13. I can't believe this game was only a 19-point blowout loss, is honestly what I can say. It's the fifth double-digit loss of the season. Four of those on the road. There was on a neutral court that was pretty much a road game. The game down in Fort Myers against Wisconsin, where Wisconsin just had a ton of fans at that game. What's interesting about this team to me is that this team is just not a good team right now. And you know, Tony Bennett so often is a guy that makes his team better than the sum of its parts. And that includes some really good, talented teams that had a sum of parts that would have been pretty good anyway without a good coach. Um, but even in the couple of off years you've seen, he's wiggled teams into tournament situations just because he can make them better as a group than they would be just individually. But and the talent on his roster for an 11-5 team it's among the best that he's ever had. 10 rotation guys right now. He's still figuring things out because eventually Tony's going to want to have it down to eight. But he's playing 10 guys regularly right now. Seven of those 10 guys were four-star prep prospects. Two of those guys are projected first-round picks, Ryan Dunn and Reese Beekman, in the upcoming NBA draft. Uh, Two of the uh, former three stars are guys who scored 17 points a game last year, transferred in. The third one is Jake Groves, who was a 40% three-point shooter coming into this season, and is not getting a lot here. Those two former three stars, Andrew Rohde, Jordan Minor, they both averaged over 17 points a game last year. They're averaging a combined 3.4 points a game this year. Yeah, that number is obviously not right. Rohde's averaging a little bit more than that. I got to update that part of my story. Uh, but Minor had 9 points. It was his first start of the season. Um, Beekman had 10 points. I mentioned in the game, 3 of 12 shooting. Isaac McKneely, 2 of 10 shooting, 8 points in the game. Dunn, I mentioned already, 4 points and 1 rebound in 23 minutes. Um, you know, I've been pushing back on the premise. My colleague Scott German, and Scott's been around UVA basketball as long as anybody that writes about UVA basketball. He covered the first two Final Fours in person that Virginia was in back in the 80s. That was it, 1981 in Philadelphia, 84 in Seattle. He's been around this program since he was a little kid. He's the guy who brought up first after hearing the whispers from folks like him that he's known for 40 or 50 years that have been around this program that, hey, maybe this is the end for Tony. And he wrote a couple columns to that effect. And I was pushing back against that because it just, I don't know that I see it, that, that Tony Bennett would want to throw in the towel just because of NIL, the transfer portal, all this stuff. But what's odd about this team is, well, I mean, I've gotten some people who've given me some I want to say pushback, just comments on this column in the last couple of days, saying, yeah, we kind of see it. This team throws in the towel. I mentioned that in the column. Tony doesn't seem to have the fire. Remember back some of the previous years, the 2019 year particularly. I remember the Duke game. I mean, Tony Bennett usually is a guy that's very calm, cool, collected on the sidelines, and he wanted to win some games so bad that he was risking technical fouls. I mean, and not because sometimes the coach does it, tries to get a technical foul to get his team up. He was a different guy that season, and we've seen fire out of Tony. Well, I don't think we're seeing the fire out of Tony this year. It's almost like, yeah, it's not working out. And that's odd. That's really weird. And his team as a result is kind of, I don't know, but, it's like they're taking that approach themselves. There's no fight, there's no hunger. What I would want to see from, I mean, my limited experience in sports myself, but also just in life. I sit here all day at Augusta Free Press. I'm looking at what I'm writing, what my writers are writing, my news writers and then my sports writers, and I'm looking at numbers all day long to see how we're resonating in the reader base and that kind of thing. And on good days, I'm happy, and on bad days, I want to work harder and get happy. And on some of those days when the numbers aren't so good, I'm a little offended. Like, hey, we wrote some good stuff here. What do we got to do to get people to read it? I'm a little pissed off. I want to see this UVA basketball team when they're down double digits again. Hopefully, it never doesn't happen again. But if they're down double digits, I want to see them pissed off that they're not playing better. I want to see them look around at their teammates and say, "Come on, guys, let's do this." We're not seeing that right now. That's the we're just seeing resignation, and I am not one who, like some of the folks who've written me, and I think that Scott has intimated in his columns. I don't think Tony's checked out. I mean, this is a guy, and I wrote this, a Midwestern guy, and his Midwestern values tell him you got to earn that money you're getting paid. I had somebody write me from Idaho to tell me, well, Pullman isn't in the Midwest. I had to write him back to say, okay, so Tony's job before UVA was at Washington State out in Pullman, but he's a Wisconsin guy, born and raised. That's Midwest. So, um, but he's not going to want to go out like this. His buddy Jay Wright, who left the game after 2022 Final Four, took his Villanova team to the Final Four. He stepped away from basketball, and he says he's not coming back. And he was frustrated at the way things are in terms of the Wild West of how you have to reconstruct your roster every year because of the instant transfer portal, and the NIL, kind of changing things up there as far as that goes, having to recruit and re-recruit your roster every year. But he at least left after a Final Four run. That's the way to go. If you're going to say, "Hey, I'm frustrated," do it like Nick Saban. Nick Saban is not saying publicly that it's the way things are changing, but it is. And he went out after a playoff appearance. I mean, go out that way, right? Um, you don't want your legacy, if things were going in this direction, which I don't think they are, but if they were, you wouldn't want them to be on a bad season. That would make it look like you're just giving up. Um, I will say that I remember thinking it's been 5 years, almost 5 years, since the Final Four in 2019. I'm looking around to see. I've got some memorabilia here behind me, from the Final Four. I'm trying to look around here to see if it's visible, and I can't believe it's not right now. I'm probably sitting in front of it, but I've got confetti from the floor that I picked up on my way out of, the football stadium there where they played the games, and got that signed basketball from Tony back there, and I think my shoes that I wore on the floor, I retired them because they touched the floor that where Virginia won the championship. I left that night thinking, man, there's gonna be 4 or 5 more of these. This is just the first. This isn't the last. And it's not anything that it's not Tony's fault that things changed so dramatically. I mean, COVID came, NIL, the transfer portal, with guys being able to play immediately after transferring. Um, it's changed the way the game is played for everybody, not just for Virginia, obviously, but for Virginia. Tony Bennett's a guy that, as a coach, his system is established. It's where to learn that pack line defense that he loves to play, and for obvious reason, it's had a lot of success over the years. It takes a lot of repetition, not just practice repetition, but game repetition. It can take a couple of years for guys to really know what they're doing, and then for a unit to gel in playing it together. And that's why when you see the teams that Tony's had that were successful, it's teams that where the guys stuck around. You think of the first run of the great Tony teams. Malcolm Brogdon, and Anthony Gill and London Parentas were together with Justin Anderson and then Joe Harris for, a core of that group was together for 3 years. and they had a lot of success during that 3-year run. And then the run of the guys that eventually won the title in 2019, Kyle Guy, Ty Jerome, DeAndre Hunter, those guys had, by the time they were, in their third year, that's when they won the title in 2019. They'd been playing that together for, DeAndre only played 2 years. He redshirted the first year, but they'd played together for a couple of good years there, and Ty and Kyle had played together for 3 years. And so it's 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 at the end of those cycles where Tony's teams are the best ready to play championship level basketball. we've not had a team that's been together that long really since. I mean, when you start thinking about guys transferring out, transferring in, that started around the COVID era. And, last year's team won 25 games, won a share of the ACC regular season title, got a number 4 seed in the tournament, lost in the first round on a miracle 3-point shot with a couple seconds to go. But uh, and then you see this year's team. There's a lot of talent, but there's a lot of youth outside of Reese Beekman. Even Jake Groves, who's a senior, the other older guy who plays a lot. This is his first year in the system. There's a lot of new guys in this system. And so, as much talent as there is on the floor, they're still learning. They don't know how to play the pack line as well as the coaches that we're going against in the ACC know how to play against the pack line. Those coaches are better at strategizing against the pack line defense than right now the Virginia kids are at playing the pack line defense. And so, that's a that's an obvious disadvantage for Tony Bennett. And also this it's similar on offense. His offense is something that, Tony doesn't really call a lot of plays. I mean, coming out of a timeout, or if he calls a timeout instead of a play, you'll see a play called perhaps for a guy, but it's a motion type offense, the mover blocker signs offense. It's read and react. Um, and then even the triangle offense it's basically decisions made by the players. There's no, hey, we're gonna do a pick and roll and get the ball to done here. It's during the flow of the game. It's Tony's not holding his hand up one or two or whatever, and then that runs a play. It takes a lot of guys getting reps, both again in practice and in games, to be able to play it well. It's it's something they gotta just get with years of experience. And this era, it's hard to say you're gonna get years of experience. It's hard to say that. This year, you're not seeing years of experience. And if I keep wanting to see and waiting to see this team, the talent is there. I think at some point it's going to gel and it's going to be hard to beat. But is it going to be soon enough to make it so they don't have to go to Washington, the ACC tournaments in Washington this year, without having to win the ACC tournament, probably winning 4 games to do so? Because at this stage, there's, unless they go on a hot streak, there's no at large bid for this UVA team. 5 double-digit losses, 3 by 20 points, the other 2 by 16 and 19. I mean, it's going to take a long winning streak to overcome that. So, say all that to say, we can worry about what comes later. I know that's a focus for a lot of folks. Hey, how does Tony manage the next few years? Let's just get through this year. That's that's the thing I'll say there. There's one more column that you might be watching this for to hear me talk about. My tweet from NIL Booster exposes the seeming underbelly of UVA basketball recruiting. I think that one deserves its own podcast. So I am going to delay that one to tomorrow. We'll probably merge that one with the Virginia Tech preview that I'll do, because I'm out of the witness protection program. I'm going to be back talking more regularly, so we'll do that one tomorrow. But in the meantime, if you have any questions for me, any points to make, you want to call me a dumbass. I haven't had that yet from the last few columns I've written, but it happens, right? So that's okay. Email me at chris@augustafreepress.com.